based on what the futures were indicating as the certainty of a Donald Trump presidency became clear.
Right. I mean, last night, the volatility was wild. At one point, the futures for the Dow, I think it was, were down 800 points.
Yes.
Interestingly, though, Asian markets got crushed. And then as we hit into the European markets, things started to slow down and started to calm. Even a half hour, 45 minutes ago, there was talk about what is the policy for circuit breakers to kick in, that if trading starts to fall down below 7 or even 10%, which is an enormous drop. You know, not unprecedented, but a huge drop. What is the policy for circuit breakers to kick in to try to protect those? We then began to see the futures begin to slow down. The European markets ended the day mostly flat, or not, in fact, not wildly down. We're going to get a sense
We're
of
actually looking, interestingly, the numbers are up slightly,
right?
just a tick.
So this is an amazing turnaround.
This is
like, look at those numbers
here.
Well, and so you've seen the evolution of the thinking that the markets thought Clinton's going to win.
Right.
Then they saw the polls actually come in, and it turned out Trump was ahead.
Right.
The futures started to fall. Then it looked like Trump was going to win. They tanked. I mean, everything fell. Futures, commodities, currencies, they all fell as though they had dropped an anchor. Then, since then, we've now had, about 7 or 8 hours of trading and of thinking and of digesting. We've had the now president-elect's speech, and people have had a chance to digest that and get a sense of how he's going to be as president, which, there's not a lot of data to go on there. But this is fascinating. And this tells me that people have a little bit more faith. Paul Krugman, we were talking about his column this morning, noted Nobel-winning economist, said that his concern is all of this happens at a bad time. What makes it especially bad right now is the fundamentally fragile state much of the world is in right now, 8 years after the financial crisis. His concern was that we were headed straight into a recession. Well, now he's just put out a tweet saying, in fact, I'm having some second thoughts about that.
Really?
That on the short term, much like Brexit, I'm not sure that the case is there. And wow, look at these numbers. Point in the same direction he is.
We'll be listening to Canada's finance minister. We haven't heard from Bill Morneau on this yet, but you can imagine there are meetings going on in Ottawa about what to do. I want to bring in a guest, and I'd like you to stay here if you wouldn't mind as well. Conference Board of Canada's chief economist, Craig Alexander, often on our network, and good to have him with us from Ottawa this morning. Hello.
Good morning, Heather.
Can you help us understand this? We were bracing, both Peter and I were, standing pat for a huge drop in the market numbers, and they're actually up. Craig, what does that mean? How do we interpret that?
Well, I think actually markets are waiting for the dust to settle. I think that there was such a surprise when the polls were coming in, and there was a very visceral negative reaction in global financial markets. And then I think that what's happened is, as more time has gone by, I think markets are basically saying, well, we don't know what we're going to get from Trump, so let's wait and see. And I think that that's where you're starting to see the market in Europe come back to like a flat reading. And it is true. Like, we can look at his election platform to get some guidance around where his priorities are. But we, relative to any other presidential candidate who has won, we have very little information about what the individual is likely to do now when they take office.
Interesting. So maybe don't overreact. We'll wait and see because so much unclear. You want to ask about, though, trade as part of this. Well, I think
because the short-term volatility of what we've been watching and how the overnight markets have reacted, and now, in fact, how North American markets are reacting on open, speaks to the uncertainty that Craig says. But, I mean, on the rhetoric around trade, Craig, we've seen him very anti-NAFTA. I wonder, from a Canadian manufacturer, a Canadian exporter's perspective, how on earth do you plan for this? Do you need to start factoring in contingencies like the potential for tariffs coming back, for the flow of goods and workers across the border to slow? How on earth do you plan for that if you're a Canadian company?
Well, I think this is where a lot of the uncertainty lies, because he made such negative comments, such protectionist comments with respect to applying tariffs on Chinese and Mexican imports. He talked about, he certainly isn't going to head down the path of continuing the negotiations for a trans-Pacific partnership. From a Canadian point of view, one of the scariest things that Donald Trump said was that, he wants to basically open up NAFTA and potentially renegotiate the terms. So when you think about Trump's economic policies, I think that from a domestic point of view, I think markets are going to take solace from the fact that there is a lot of checks and balances. Trump will have to work with Congress to get things through that affect the domestic economy. But on the trade front, the president actually has a lot of latitude to act independently. Now, there are a lot of U.S. companies that would be really badly hurt if there was barriers thrown up on the Canada-U.S. border. I mean, just think about the auto sector, where the parts for an automobile being manufactured in North America, those parts cross the border several times before the final product is created. So, you know, large trade barriers between Canada and the United States would actually be very harmful to many U.S. businesses, and it's not in their interest. So I don't think we should panic. I think that basically he's sending a signal that Canadians are going to be very uncomfortable with, in the sense that, you know, he's talking in a very protectionist way, but at the same time, you know, he is going to do what he thinks is in America's interest, and we do have a North American-based production system.
It's interesting. Laura Dawson was in with me earlier. She's the head of the Canada Institute at the Wilson Center, so U.S.-Canada relations. And she said exactly what you said, Craig, in terms of once he gets to learn, because he probably doesn't know just how integrated the economy continentally has become, there will be a lot of American jobs at risk if he pursues this path that he's talked about. Can I come back to something you said domestic policy-wise? One of the things we know, he has said he's going to cut corporate taxes. So maybe the U.S. becomes more attractive than Canada from an investment point of view. But he's also going to talk cut personal income taxes, reduce the number of classes. And there are people talking about tax cuts, increased spending. That's going to lead the United States right back to recession and the world along with it. Craig, what do you think?
Well, his platform really is based on stimulating the U.S. economy through lower business taxes and lower personal income taxes, which he believes will make America more competitive and help fuel growth. He also talks about doing $500 billion of infrastructure spending. So, you know, he also has some other domestic priorities. But I think that from a financial point of view, I think the challenge is that his platform would basically raise the U.S. debt level by about anywhere from $4 to $5.5 billion. And that would probably take the size of the debt in America from around 75% of the value of their economy up to around 95% by 2026, and that is problematic, because when you start getting near 100%, that's when countries actually start to have problems. But again, you have to be careful in terms of interpreting the platform versus the policies that will actually get implemented, because he will have to work with Congress to get these measures through. Now, it is a Republican-controlled Congress, and he will have he will have an awful lot of political chips that he can play, because he has won a mandate. But at the same time, I think that some of the more radical things that he has said in recent years, or in recent months, you know, it may not get easily through even a Republican-controlled Congress. It's important to remember Republicans and Democrats don't vote necessarily along party lines once they're in office. They really vote on the basis of what will happen to their constituencies. So it's a bit different than Canada. The parties don't really vote perfectly along party lines. So Donald Trump is going to have to work with Congress to get a lot of the policies that he may wish to put in place implemented.
And the Republicans hold both sides of that, House and Senate, after the result last night. Craig Alexander, thank you very much, Chief Economist for the Conference Board of Canada, and Peter Armstrong, thank you as well for everything.